Bonjour, Simon Kidston.
Enchanté.
Moi je pensais c'est bien la 21 rue de Rivoli.
Absolument.
Et Monsieur Friedrich, il est là?
Ouais, monsieur Frédéric ici.
C'est pas vous là, Friedrich, 21 rue de Rivoli?
Et c'est étonnant.
Il est plus là?
Ah mais c'est 1938.
Oui, bon,
Ça date un peu.
un peu de temps a passé.
Ouais.
Donc je vais plus retrouver Monsieur Friedrich ici.
Malheureusement.
Et ni de Bugatti apparemment.
Non plus.
C'est la vie. Time passes and the world changes. Where once upon a time the smartest Bugatti showroom on the Côte d'Azur stood, today there's just a humble bike rental shop. But the sports car which a young British naval officer ordered there 80 years ago has hardly changed at all. This is the story of how many decades and thousands of miles later, it finally came home. It all started with a letter.
The University of Buckingham, Buckingham MK18, 19th of May 1987. Dear Mr. Bowman, I've been told by the Bugatti Owners Club that you are the current owner of the 1939 57C registered HPK 50 with bodywork by Gangloff. I am a classic car enthusiast and am trying, for the sake of curiosity, to trace my father's old cars, particularly his Bugattis. That started an expensive hobby. As you're probably aware, my father bought HPK 50 early in 1939, sold the Bugatti in 1955. I apologize for any inconvenience caused. Yours sincerely, Simon Kidston.
Some 30 years have passed since I wrote that letter, and many more since the Bugatti first left the factory. It wouldn't have survived through the generations without the care of men who have devoted themselves to looking after them.
I've spent a whole lifetime thinking about nothing else but cars. When I was young, my father was involved with Bugattis. They talked about nothing else, so it was a very important thing for me eventually to get involved in them. But having driven every car, because when I was young I worked for the Checkered Flag and we had every car you could possibly imagine. D-type Jaguars, Aston Martins, Lotuses, I drove everything. And having spent a lifetime thinking about the cars, in the end it was the only car that I was totally and utterly obsessed with, really. Totally obsessed with Bugatti and the design, the line, the look and the way they perform.
I wonder what prompted me to write this letter at the time. I suppose awareness that my father had a life before I came along, that he was already a grown man when I was born. He was 57. And I suppose a curiosity about his previous life, what he'd done, his work in the Navy, and the way that he lived when he was my age. He was only 28 when he bought this car. I was 19 when I wrote this letter, so 9 years younger. I suppose getting to know your father.
Our journey starts here, in the English countryside.
One of the things I love about cars, and this car is a great example, is how they bring people together. Cars are not made by themselves. They're designed by people, built by people, bought by people, raced, owned, driven, restored these days. The human connections that old cars often have are what fascinate me. In the case of this car, obviously, my father is the man who ordered it, bought it, enjoyed it for many, many years, looked after it. But then, of course, the next owner, Hugh Bowman, a garage owner from Weybridge, who, according to his son John, was a comparatively understated man. He was an MG and Morris agent, so for him to go out and buy flamboyant red Bugatti sports car was somewhat out of character. His son, John, who I subsequently have met through this car, the American collector who owned it after that, Chip Connor, who's one of the world's great connoisseurs, and all of the other people who in some way have contributed to its history, who have helped me with information. Even the people that you meet nowadays, you go to a petrol station and a person gives you the thumbs up or says, great car. What is it? Bugatti, is that Italian? Where do they come from? It's great. "1987. Dear Mr. Kidston, thank you for your letter addressed to my father. Unfortunately, he died last year. Yes, I still have the 57C HPK 50, which was the first car I drove legally at midnight before my 17th birthday. So, as you will understand, I have become very attached to the car after all these years. I imagine your main emotion about the car is regret that your father sold it at all in the first place. You must not be too hard on him. It was impossible 30 years ago to foresee the amazing increasing value of such cars. You can only make a decision on the day. Thank you very much for writing, and I'm delighted to know that your father is alive and well. I did not meet him at the time. Anyway, I was only 13, but I remember the arrival of the Bugatti very well. Yours sincerely, John Bowman, 20th of June, 1987.
That was a fantastic pleasure, Simon. I'm very grateful to you.
John, very, very well driven.
And so the Bugatti has paid a visit to the family with whom it spent over 4 decades. But there's a place it called home even before that, and it happens to have been my first home too. By strange coincidence, it's almost 60 years to the month since the Bugatti last roared down this driveway. Welcome home.
Makes you think of all the people that you grew up with here who are no longer around. Except in spirit.
There's one more place I need to visit before leaving England. A very personal place. Somewhere I want to take the Bugatti just once. And although it's a pilgrimage, there's only one way that person would want to be remembered. Pressing on, as he would have said. No point in hanging around. People often ask me how I became so interested in cars. It's down to one man.
Hume Ronald Archibald Kidston, Lieutenant Commander, Royal Navy. 11th of March 1910, 16th of January 1996. In memory of a life lived to the full, on land, at sea, and in the air.
Here we are at last in Molsheim, the historic home of Bugatti. It's where this car was created, from the fertile mind of the young Jean Bugatti, the son of founder Ettore. After the Wall Street crash, they knew they had to diversify to survive. Racing cars alone wouldn't pay the bills any longer. The Type 57 saved them, but it was the company's final flowering before World War II brought everything to a sudden end. Racing, business, even life. But all wasn't lost. I wonder what Ettore and Jean would make of their modern-day namesake. One thing's for sure, they wouldn't have many complaints about its performance. How do 1,000 horsepower, 16 cylinders, 4 turbos and 250 miles an hour sound? One thing hasn't changed since Bugatti's heyday. Building exquisitely crafted grand touring cars is as heroically unprofitable as ever. Ettore once said, the creative process should be the manifestation and crowning of one's personality, and not a mere source of profit. But they're working on that.
Bonjour, Simon.
Hello, Julius.
Magnificent car.
Good to see you.
Good to see you here, Simon.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Well, it's a real pleasure, not only having you, but also this magnificent car.
What do you think?
Mind-blowing.
So, shall we go for a drive?
Simon, your father bought this car more or less directly from Jean Bugatti, no?
Yes, he did.
I think there are a couple of places we should go and visit now.
Let's do it.
Great. This is the place.
This is the spot where Jean Bugatti died.
Yeah. It was the 11th of August, 1939.
So Jean Bugatti was testing the Bugatti Type 57, so
C.
based, I guess, on the mechanics of this car,
57C, the same mechanics as this car, which had
but
just
with a
won
racing tank-style body.
Yeah.
He was testing that car that had recently won the 24 Hours of Le Mans and was supposedly going to be entered into a race shortly afterwards, which of course
Grand
never
Prix Le
took
Mans.
place
Exactly.
because of the outbreak of war at the beginning of September. And what happened? Jean was driving along this road at
At very high speeds.
200 kilometers an hour,
Yes.
perhaps.
Jean had done several runs. And then he said to Robert Lemaitre, let me go one last time. But I'll do the run on my own. And there was the postman from Dolisheim who came out of one of these side tracks. And Jean, that's not, many people don't know that. Jean had killed somebody while driving a year earlier. So he saw this guy coming with his bicycle out of one of the side tracks. And he tried to avoid him. He saw him too late. And he tried to avoid him and he hit a tree. Well, the tree's not there obviously anymore. And he killed himself at 200 kilometers per hour immediately. There are some rumors that probably it wasn't quite coincidence. Well, in his personal diary, he had made a cross for the 11th of August, and he had written a letter to his family that in the case of his death, all the insurance money on his life insurance, would keep the company alive.
Mm-hmm. And did it?
Well, as you know, the war broke out, and Bugatti died with Jean, and finally died with Ettore in 1947.
do you start telling the Bugatti family story? Carlo, an avant-garde furniture designer who's also credited with designing the world's first racing bicycle? Perhaps his son Rembrandt, a famous animal sculptor? His father Giovanni, a sculptor and architect? Or sister Luigia, the muse of the painter Giovanni Segantini? With a background like that, it was inevitable that Ettore Bugatti would leave his mark, and Jean helped cement the legend. What's the magic ingredient that makes their creations so enduringly desirable? It's probably the same mysterious quality that drives a man to pursue one car in a million halfway across the world to bring it home. The French call it je ne sais quoi. Let's call it soul.
I'm coming home, baby, now. I'm coming home now, right away. I'm coming home, baby, now. I'm sorry now I ever went away. Every night and day I go and stay. I'm coming home, baby. Coming home, baby, now.
You know I'm waiting here for you.
I'm coming home now, real soon.
You've been gone.
Coming home, baby, now.
You don't know what I'm going through.
I'm coming home, I know I'm overdue.
Since you went away.
Expect me any day now, real soon. I'm coming home.
Come on home.
Coming home, baby, now.
I was telling that relative of your father, I'm sending him an email tonight. Say, Simon, your father would be very, very proud to see what you're doing with all his cars.
You're in my arms, I'll be fine. I'm coming home.
Come on home.
I'm coming home, baby, now.
You know I'm counting every day.
I'm coming home now, yeah, yeah.